questions?
I was laying down. Yeah.
So I left you with a question. I left you with a question of, were any of these results unusual? David had a vote, which I liked. No, because there are the options that we have, 1 through 6. I love that answer, by the way. I think there's more to it than just that, though. Gallup. Some of you use Gallup polls in your exam question for non-misleading statistics. And what Gallup will often do is it will say, okay, here's 1,000 people. I want to ask them a simple question. Do you think government is doing a good job, yes or no? I'm making this a very basic, very open-ended question because the answer or the question isn't important. What if all 1,000 said yes? Would you consider that an outlier? If they ask 1,000 Americans a yes or no question and all 1,000 say yes.
Yes.
What if all 1,000 say no?
Still be an outlier.
It still seems like an outlier, right? But isn't that like rolling a 1,000-sided die? It's one of the sides of that die is that everybody says yes. Does that make sense?
Wouldn't it be rolling a 2-sided die 1,000 times? Because we only got 2 options.
Same idea, but if you're keeping track of the results after 1,000 rolls, one of the results is it came up on the same side. You flipped a coin. Say it this way. You flipped a coin 1,000 times, and you got heads every single time. Wouldn't that seem like an outlier?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Now, I'm not saying that applies to this distribution, because it doesn't directly. But you can't rule these things out as an outlier just because it's within our values. So is an 8-foot-tall person, theoretically speaking. Although that would seem very outlierish to have an 8-foot-tall person, even though it's in our range of values. So I want to talk about this idea of... Candace, go ahead.
I see what you're saying. So had we rolled 260 times and all 260 were 6s, we would definitely be thinking there's something going on with that dice.
Thank you for understanding 244 to a T. That's essentially what we talk about 244 all the time. Is we got a result. How we stop thinking about the dice being fair. But this die appears to be fair, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This die appears to be fair. These percentages, 16.5, 14.6, 16.2, that's a little high, right? But it's still, if you put a normal margin of error on these percentages, like a plus or minus 3%, which is actually too narrow for only 260, with 260 trials, you should have a plus or minus about 6 or 7% on these. When you put a plus or minus 7%, can you distinguish any of these from each other? No, they're indistinguishable from each other, once you've accounted for the noise. So that makes me believe that what Candace just described did not happen with us. Thank you, sister. So David, back to your point. This is the empirical result of our experiment. Could you have put a theoretical probability on here? Before we even started?
Yeah.
Before we even started the experiment, could you have given me percentages that this should have obeyed? And what would those percentages have been?
Like 0.16.
Say that again, Tom?
0.16.
Yo, thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. You're saying you're giving me decimal. Yeah. 0.167? 0.167 is what you're saying, right, Tom?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Wouldn't this have been theoretically what we would have expected to see from the experiment? I'm rounding it off. I think Tom said it better, 0.1666 repeating. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, saying like, ask 1,000 people, and 1,000 people are not the outlier, right? Like if one person says maybe they're the outlier, that one event, not the entire data set. Right?
There's many ways to quantify it out. It's based also on the average result from the crew. I use the question, is government doing a good job? Generally they say no. Americans generally say no, the government sucks. So the fact that 1,000 of them would say yes is by itself unbelievable.
Sure.
But the fact that 1,000 of them, when given a choice even between 2 equally likely results, and I'm forcing them to have only 2 results. You can allow them to have 3, yes, no, no opinion. But even if you give them that third, what I'm trying to say is just because a value is in the list of possibles doesn't mean it's not an outlier. Yours is an outlier too, for sure. I'm just saying that just because you see it on this list doesn't rule out the fact that it might be unusual. That's where you have to look at this column too. So what I want to focus on right now, I want to take a pause from this experiment, and I want to swing over and just throw a couple ideas on the board. A couple ideas on the board, okay?